Jews believed that Jesus was not the Messiah, that he was an itinerant preacher who probably got crucified for creating public disturbance or maybe even blasphemy or whatever. Christians believe that Jesus was in fact the Son of God. They're believing very different things about them. And so when it comes to their claims for inspiration of Scripture, I think the Old Testament Scriptures are inspired by God. Jesus comes in fulfillment of them. Jewish claims that Jesus was not the Messiah, I think, are false. And Allah's claims to worship, Allah's claims that, Muhammad's claims that Jesus did not rise from the dead are false. And so because of that, they're not rightly relating to the same God. I do not believe that the Allah of Muhammad is the same as the God and Father of Jesus Christ.
I want to appreciate that you're an ecumenical Christian. There was a time, my response is really, there was a time when all of the Christian expressions argued against one another vehemently. And I still think they disagree on many things. But we've come to a point in time when I could go to Mount Angel Seminary, which is a Roman Catholic seminary, and one of my classmates was Seventh-day Adventist. And I remember, because my grandmother is Seventh-day Adventist, that the Adventists used to put in their literature that the Pope was the Antichrist. And then they were sending their people to Catholic seminary. So I think we have come to, we have moved on that question. And that gives me a lot of hope, and it gives me appreciation for at least respect between the traditions. So I would say, I don't know if this answers your question, but I think all of those traditions have to respect what they share. And if they want to disagree about what's different, fine. But at least that they respect what they share.
Yes, sir, in the back.
When you get to John 14, it says, "I'm the way, the truth, and the life." When it comes to the Father, but how do you interpret that?
Are you asking me that? Good. Okay.
What did he ask?
He asked, how do you interpret the scripture, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. And I have my little sheet with chapters and verses down here, but I can't find it. John 14:6. Thank you. I knew you'd know. I can do that with some of them, and I have a lot of scripture in my memory, but numbers are not my forte. I could find it in my Bible, but anyway, how do I deal with that? I think there are different ways to look at that statement. My personal interpretation of that statement, first of all, I'll give mine and then I'll go through a couple scholarly ones. Mine is, Jesus is talking about living your life in the way that Jesus did, and speaking the truth as Jesus did, and honoring the truth that Jesus spoke, and honoring the truths in what Jesus taught. That's how I interpret that. Now, I mentioned that scripture to my brother. I said, this is how I take this statement. I know they're going to talk about it because it's one of the arguments for exclusivity, right? My brother said, I've always understood me in that sentence to mean me. And I said, huh? And then I went, well, yeah. Because you really do understand Jesus as you understand. It's the way it comes to you, the way it makes sense to you. So I think that's a valid interpretation, maybe not linguistically, but in terms of faith it is. Scholars would say that those I am statements in John are compositions of John, or whoever wrote that fourth gospel. That they are not things that historical Jesus actually said. Okay, I think we still have to deal with them because there's still somebody responding to who Jesus is, and who was respected enough by the people who compiled the writings of the Bible to put it as a gospel. So I do think you still have to look at that statement. That's the way I interpret it. I also notice that it begins with I am, which is the translation of the name of God. And so you could also say Jesus is speaking something about God in saying that.
This brings up the larger question of interpretation. And for all of you out there, I would suggest that it ought not matter to you what that passage means to me or what it means to Frodo. I think we have to ask, what did it mean to the person who spoke it? What did Jesus mean by what he said? And I think he was very clear. And so, on an earlier comment, the gentleman over here, I have no idea what was meant by a heart and head sort of thing. That when people speak, we interpret them by what they said. We need to try to figure out, what did a person mean by what he said? And nobody likes to be misunderstood. Nobody likes to be misunderstood at all. It bothers us. We don't like being taken out of context. Why would Jesus be any different? You say the scholarship, the scholars think that this was just a composition of John. I would say I find no evidence for that whatsoever. Where's the evidence of that? I think it's special pleading. They're assuming their conclusions. They don't like it, and so they're assuming that Jesus couldn't have said that because it doesn't fit their picture of who Jesus was. The Gospel of John, I believe, is reliable. Dates to about 90 A.D., claimed to be written, and has historically been understood throughout, from the early church on, from the patristics on, written by an apostle of Jesus, eyewitness account. I think it's reliable. And so I think Jesus meant what he said. He was telling his disciples that he was going away, he's going to come back with them. They wanted to know how they could follow him, they don't even know where he's going, and he said, I'm the way to the Father. No one comes to the Father but by me. And the Greek there is very clever. No one means no one. It's a good translation. No one comes to the Father but by Jesus. There's a reason why exclusivists think that Jesus was making an exclusive claim with that verse, because he was.
Yes, sir. Blue sweatshirt.
Yeah, my question is for Frodo. At one point, one of your responses was saying that Paul was including all the other gods with his conversation with the people at Athens. And my question to you is, what would you do with the rest of Scripture that manifest what he believed? What do you do with the rest of the Scriptures? How can you edge them out and not include them and just take one text and interpret Paul's life by one text? It's hard for me to grab those two and put them together.
Okay. Actually, I wasn't clear. I don't think that Paul was accepting all those other gods and goddesses. I think what Paul was including, what Paul was accepting, was the admission on the part of the Athenians that there was part of God that they couldn't know. And by having a statue to an unknown God, I think that's what Paul was grasping in the thought of the Greeks of his day. I don't think he threw out his Jewish monotheist position at all. But I think he opened to their recognition that you can't depict who God is. And he follows right up with that. God doesn't look like anything in bone or stone or metal. He's appreciating that they recognize that. I think he understood that unknown God statue to mean that, and I think he's meeting them where they are with that. I don't think he's accepting all of their polytheist gods and goddesses. Okay? Hopefully that's clear.
I mean, obviously, I don't agree with the interpretation that was given earlier of that passage. That's probably to be expected here. That passage refers to Paul. He's in Athens. He's waiting. But while he waits, he's doing what he always does, preaches Christ and the resurrection. And as he's walking around, he's seeing this town, this city saturated with idols. And it says that his spirit was provoked in him because, as you said, he's a strident monotheist. And he believes idolatry to be an abomination. And so he finds an altar to an unknown God, and I believe he uses that as a point of contact. And he says, what you have worshipped in ignorance, which is critical there, I now proclaim to you. And then he speaks of this God, and ultimately in the passage that I read, he ends up saying the times of ignorance God has overlooked. It's a culpable ignorance on their part. He's overlooked it, but now he says, repent and believe that there is judgment coming. There's judgment coming, and God has fixed that. He's validated this by raising a man from the dead, through whom he's going to judge the world. So I think that ignorance is culpable, as Paul says. It's just a point of contact.
What's the chapter and verse so they can
Acts chapter 17. Acts chapter 17.
The lady in the front had a question.
Yeah, all of this, still, one of the questions I always have is how can any one of us, immortal, ever tell how God looks and how God thinks, and absolutely go with that as the only way there is to God, the divine, the whatever the name you have for it.
My response to that would be left to our own devices, absolutely hopeless. Oh, I'm sorry. How can any of us as mortals, limited, finite, ever believe that we can know who God is?
All of who God is.
All of who God is. Okay. So my response to that is, left to our own devices, we have no hope whatsoever. Our sin, our rebellion against God has completely separated us from Him. Genesis 3 describes the fall in detail. We are hopelessly lost. We need a word from God. We need revelation. We need God to break in and speak to us. And I believe that is what He has done. Now, I know that other people claim the same thing. I recognize that. And if we could recognize that, then I think we're at a good starting point. Then we have to evaluate. We have to evaluate. And I believe, especially, as I'm going to make, hopefully, I'll try to make clear in my closing remarks, I think we should start with Jesus and evaluate His claims. Start with Jesus and evaluate His claims. Because God has revealed Himself through His Word and through Jesus. And then we begin to evaluate.
I think that we can't know. And I think the problem with, when we are trying to see what Jesus meant, we're going to talk about Jesus, you have to look at what does it say, you have to look at the actual words, you have to look at the context, you have to look at the times, you have to look at what the tradition has held over the years in different times, in different settings, and all of that with openness to being moved out of your position, really with openness to the Spirit or to prayer in your own way. Because it's not, and you can't reduce it to, well, X plus Y equals Z, because it's going to be too confusing. And I think my point about all of that, really, I appreciate the question, because I don't think we can know. And I think the minute that we say we know, we've left what all the traditions teach about, and maybe what you're also saying, that you can't know by yourself, that none of us has the take on all of who God is, but that we understand through our own understanding, that we apprehend the truth really through our own experience, and that's the only way we can.
We have another question from the lady right there.
Okay, my question is for Frodo. Dr. Miles has showed us the anchor of his belief. Frodo, you have such scattered thoughts. You're all over the place. I want to know where you anchored yourself down to. You're letting us go. There's so many paths. So does that not, in effect, in a rather direct way, defeat the fact that there would be a deity? If there's a deity that we can understand,